Trauma is a word we hear everywhere now. At the same time, a lot of people feel unsure whether it even applies to them. Some people think that trauma means something very extreme. Others feel like the word is being overused. So, I want to slow this down today and talk about what trauma actually means. Now, this attempt is not to label anyone, not to diagnose. I'm just trying to bring in some clarity here. One of the most important things to understand about trauma is this: trauma is not defined by what happened, it is actually defined by what happened inside your nervous system when safety or support was missing. Now, two people can go through the same experience, and one may feel traumatized while the other doesn't. This is not because one is weaker or one is more sensitive. It is because their systems experience that moment differently. So, this tells us that trauma is less about that event itself and more about whether your body felt safe, supported, and able to cope up in that time. And what I'm trying to say here is that trauma is less about the event itself. It is more about whether your body felt safe, supported, and able to cope at that time. Now, this definition matters because it removes comparison. A lot of people say things like, I shouldn't call this trauma, other people had it worse, it wasn't that bad. But the nervous system doesn't measure trauma by comparison, it measures it by overwhelm. If your system felt too much, too fast, and too alone, that experience can leave an imprint. Now, let's go further and understand two different types of trauma. You might have heard the terms big T trauma and small t trauma. Let's talk about what they actually mean without ranking them. Big T trauma usually refers to events that are clearly overwhelming. Things like accident, abuse, major medical events, sudden loss, natural disasters. These are the experiences where most people would agree that yes, that would overwhelm a system. Whereas small t trauma doesn't come from one big event, it comes from repeated experiences of emotional unsafety, especially early in life. These are things like being constantly dismissed, not being emotionally seen, having to grow up too fast, being the strong one, responsible very early on in your life, and something like learning that your needs were inconvenient. Now, here, I also want to clarify that small t trauma isn't called small because it hurts less. It's called small because it's less visible. But over the time, these experiences shape how the nervous system learns to survive. Now, let's also understand here why small t trauma is often misunderstood. It is often overlooked because of a couple of reasons. Maybe because there was food on the table, there was no obvious abuse, life looked fine from the outside. So people tell themselves that I don't have trauma. But the body does not respond to that logic, it responds to patterns. If your system learned early on that you had to manage on your own, you couldn't fully relax, you had to stay alert to be okay, all of these things shape how safe the world feels, even years later. So it's important to understand that when trauma happens, big or small, the body doesn't say this is trauma. The body asks one question: how do I survive this? So, what it does, it adapts. Some people become hyper alert, overthinking, overworking, emotionally self sufficient. Others become numb, disconnected, shut down, avoidant of their emotions. Now, these are not personality flaws, these are intelligent survival responses. They helped you once, they just might be costing you now. Now, this is usually where people start to feel confused. Because if these patterns helped you survive earlier, it makes sense that your system would keep using them now. Now, the problem here is that life moves on, but the nervous system doesn't automatically update. So people reach adulthood, things look relatively stable, and yet they feel anxious, exhausted, or disconnected without really understanding why. This is why so many adults say things like, I don't know why I'm anxious, I don't know why I'm so tired, nothing is wrong, but I don't feel okay. Now, the original threat may be gone, but the body is still operating as if safety has to be earned, predicted, or managed. And once you start seeing trauma this way, a lot of the self blame begins to soften. People often stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and they start asking more helpful questions. One of those questions is this: if you're unsure whether something from your past counts as trauma, instead of asking, "Was it bad enough?" a gentle question might be, "Did my system feel safe and supported at that time?" That question usually brings more clarity than any label ever will. And this is really the lens I will be using in our conversations here. Not trying to decide whether something qualifies as trauma or not, but trying to understand how safety, support, and survival shape the nervous system over time. On this channel, I'll keep exploring trauma, attachment, and the emotional patterns that influence how we relate to ourselves and to others. Not to put people into boxes, not to overwhelm them, but to help make sense of the experiences that often feel confusing or isolating. If this way of understanding resonates with you, you can keep coming back here. We'll take it slowly and we'll keep it grounded. Till then, take care.